Do you ever feel like kids behave for the teacher across the hall, but not for you? Do they have something magical that you don't have? Well, no, but there are some things that are going on that you can learn to do. So let's talk about it today. Welcome back to the Teacher of the Heart podcast, where we tackle teaching challenges from a biblical perspective. Why are we here? Because we don't believe that our spiritual walk and teaching profession should exist in two separate domains. Rather, the hope we have in Christ should change how we approach everything, not just at home, but at school as well. So join us as we explore both the spiritual and practical sides of key teaching challenges, integrating them together so we can succeed at teaching, glorify God, and make a lasting difference in our students' hearts and lives. This episode is brought to you in partnership with the Herzog Foundation. Today, I'm so excited to be joined by Ashley, one of our team members and Teach for the Heart members. Ashley, thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited.
So, we're going to be talking about this topic of why does it sometimes seem like kids behave for teachers across the hall, but we are struggling to get them to focus. Ashley, have you ever kind of seen this dynamic play out?
Absolutely. I've seen it as a first year teacher. I was the teacher that was like, why are they behaving for Mrs. Romero and not for me? So yeah, absolutely. And then it's really common.
Yeah, and definitely me too. When I first started out, I'm like, oh my goodness, I cannot get these kids to behave. And then you see the same kids with another teacher, like, why are they listening so well? Am I doing something wrong? Sometimes we even ask, like, do I have the wrong personality?
Mhm.
Is it just something innate they have that I don't? And typically, no. Yes, certain personalities can make it easier or a little bit more challenging, but you don't have to have this magical personality or, have this. It's not that. That's not
Yeah.
what the difference is.
Yeah.
But there are some things that are happening that are making that difference. And one of the things that I've kind of figured out over the years is that there are a lot of intangible signals that we as teachers put out there for our
Mhm.
students that they pick up on all the way from kindergarten all the way up through 12th grade. They pick up on these signals
Mhm.
pretty quickly, and we don't always even realize we're sending them. Sometimes we're telling students with these signals, I'm competent, I'm capable, I expect a lot from you, and I'm going to hold you accountable. That's
Mhm.
what the teacher across the hall is doing. But sometimes we send these other signals that actually say unintentionally, I kind of don't totally know what I'm doing. I'm not quite sure what
Mhm.
to do to get you to behave. You can probably get away with a lot.
Yeah.
And those are obviously not the signals, or sometimes we send a combination of those signals. So we want to talk about what's going on. What is causing us to maybe give the wrong signals? And how can we give those right signals that make it suddenly way easier? Like it seems like it sometimes seems like it's so easy for that
Mhm.
teacher, but it's because there's a lot happening underneath the surface.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a
So
lot of not like no visuals, right? You wouldn't visually see it if you visited the classroom. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And if you observed, you would start to notice some things, but right, there's a lot of things that they did that like maybe already happened or they're just
Mhm.
part of it what they're doing and you wouldn't see them just popping into the classroom, but they're
Mhm.
there and that's what's
Yes.
making such a difference. So we're going to go back and forth and share. I have a whole bunch, Ashley has a whole bunch of these things. We're going to kind of talk about what are some of these intangibles and how can you start to make them part of your classroom. So one that comes to mind right off the bat that is an intangible, I'm going to say this, is actually our confidence.
Mhm.
So when we don't know how we're going to deal with an issue and we aren't sure if we can get a student to behave, that confidence really is that intangible signal. So students
Mhm.
really pick up on that, very, that lack of confidence versus when we get to the point where we're like, nope, I am going to be able to deal with this. I know what I'm going to do. If you do this, this is what I'm going to do, and it's going to be fine. That confidence projects in a very different way to students as well. So I think that's one intangible right off the bat. And we're going to kind of talk in a minute about, well, what do I do if I don't have confidence? How you can build that up.
Yeah, I think that confidence, and this is why I think we see the issue more with first year teachers, right? Because,
Mm-hmm.
for myself as a first year teacher, I didn't know what I was doing, and kids picked up on that. And so it's over time, you will gain confidence. But then there's also things you can do right away to gain that confidence.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of those things. I mean, one thing that you can do is First of all, when we work with teachers in our program, we start with expectations because you need to first be really clear on what you expect from students. I remember my first year teaching something simple like a kid putting their head down. And I remember like kind of trying to teach, but by simultaneously thinking, is that okay? Do I care if their head's down? Is it all right? Maybe
Mhm.
they're tired. Should I make them sit up? Like I hadn't thought that through. I didn't know. So I was not confident at all in what I should do. So I think it really starts with clear expectations for myself that I can
Mhm.
then articulate to my students of where is the line? What behavior am I okay with in my classroom and what behavior is not okay? And sometimes we're so general, be respectful. Well, what does that
Mhm.
mean? Is calling you,
Mhm.
is calling you bruh respectful or not? Like what am I okay with? What am I not okay with? What does this look like? And kind of getting really clear on that, I think is a really important first step.
Yeah. I think that you mentioned we have to be clear in our expectations. Like we have to know what is okay. But then also it's something that is so simple, but we just have to tell the students. It's amazing how much different the behavior will be if you just tell the student, I expect you to X. Because then they know what the expectation is. Whereas before, some of those misbehavior issues aren't actually them trying to be pills or difficult. They just didn't know that that wasn't okay to do. And so as soon as you said that, this is what you need to do, it changes things. It starts to shift.
Absolutely. And sometimes I think especially with older kids, we assume,
Mhm.
oh, they're high school juniors, they're high school seniors,
Yeah.
they know how to behave. Maybe. But if you're not clear in your expectation, you can't hold them accountable to that. So, like, really being clear with what you expect. Exactly. And it can be so valuable before you do an activity, even if you've already, well, the first time you do it, you've got to
Yeah.
teach your expectations. You've got to. But then, even if it's like, well, we've done this a lot of times, but it's like being clear, hey, remember, we're about to do this and we're
Mhm.
going to this, and this. That is so clarifying for
Mhm.
everybody and can make such a big difference. Something you might not even pick up on if you were observing somebody, but that's so, so key.
And one of the things that I actually stole from elementary teachers is because you mentioned like secondary students, you'd think they'd have this figured out, but elementary teachers are so specific about what they want the students to do with their bodies. And so I actually
Mm.
stole that for I do SSR, sustained silent reading, and when we start SSR, as I begin to circulate, I'm reminding the students, remember, SSR means books open, eyes on the page, mouths closed, like literally. And I just list the physical, what does it physically look like for you to be following my expectations? And it's astonishing. Like I was shocked when I started doing that because it seems so like juvenile. It's not, it's so helpful. They're like, oh yeah, eyes on the page. Oh yeah, mouths closed. Like it's so silly, but it works.
Oh, that makes so much sense, right? Just what am I actually doing with my body in this
Hmm.
activity makes so much sense. Yeah. So thinking through, maybe I need to be a little more clear. Maybe I actually need to spell out if I'm getting
Yeah.
annoyed at them for doing something, did I actually specifically say, we're not doing it this way, we're doing it
Yeah.
this way instead. So really important. So that is so clarifying for your students. Also gives you, so once again, starts to build
Mhm.
that confidence too, and it sends the right signals. Okay, this is what they expect. But then you need to know what you're going to do when students don't meet those expectations. So
Mhm.
another thing, I mean, there's so much we could talk about here, but I think this is another really big key is thinking through how am I going to respond when students fail to meet my expectations? And in Classroom Management 101, we actually go through like pretty much every area we can think of so that you are prepared
Mhm.
for literally everything. But if you're like, okay, I that feels overwhelming, you can start by just thinking like, what are the top 3 to 5 misbehaviors that I deal with in my classroom? I mean, talking should definitely be one of them, but like, what are like these kind of
Mhm.
top things? And then what am I going to do when students do that? And the magic isn't necessarily on having the exact right thing, it's on just having a plan and being like, okay, now I know what I'm going to do. Because
Mhm.
and this is where once you get to be really, really good at classroom management, you have so many tools in your toolkit. You're just like,
Yeah.
I can just pull out whatever toy. It's like a master
Yeah.
chef that doesn't need a recipe. But when we're first starting out, or we're just been struggling lately, and we honestly don't have confidence, we need that plan because then
Yeah.
we're like, okay, I might not feel super confident, but I do know. And so I can kind of like bolster my confidence. Yes,
Mhm.
I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to gather my courage and I'm just going to do it. And I'm going to do it with confidence because I already thought about it. And I believe that this is a good plan. So
Yeah.
that can make such a big difference.
And it does give you that confidence because then when the misbehavior happens, there's no panic. There's no like, oh, shoot, I'm thinking and you're on the spot. You know how to respond. So you're way more likely to respond in the right way if you have a plan ready to go. This is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to say.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So those are a couple of like the really big things right off the bat that are like might sound simple, but they make such a big
Mhm.
difference. Um, we could talk about so many other. I mean, I have so many things on my list. Ashley, what are some of the things on your list that you had? We can talk about a couple of those next.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things for me is respect. And this is difficult because this is one of those intangibles. But I think a big reason why students will behave for one teacher and not another, it's not even so much about relationship, right? Because like I had a really good relationship with my sixth period class, my first year teaching. They loved me and I loved them. They were the worst. They did not behave for me. So it's not that relationship isn't important. Relationship really is important. But like there's an element of like respect that has to come into play. And that is a difficult thing to like, well, it's all the intangibles. It happens under like the radar. It's not something where you walk out there and you're like, you will respect me. That's not how it works. And so it is a really tricky thing, but I do think it's one of the key things. I would be curious to hear your thoughts on building respect, like how you see teachers are able to build respect with their students.
Yeah, I think all of this ties together. And obviously, being someone worthy of respect
Yeah.
is really helpful, right? And I don't
Mhm.
think if you I don't like I said, I don't think demanding respect
Yeah.
typically works very
Mhm.
well, but you demand it in other ways. You
Mhm.
command it and you earn it, I think, by being clear. Being
Yeah.
clear in your expectations and then holding students accountable consistently. I think that really builds respect and helps them see, okay, my teacher, yeah, they are going to hold me accountable. And then also
Mhm.
by being good at what you teach,
Yeah.
caring about your subject and
Mhm.
like helping them understand it. So if you're like great at, the classroom management skills, but you like hate your subject or you just make it boring or like you just,
Mhm.
you really are not explaining it and everyone's so confused, it's going to be hard. They're going to be
Yeah.
frustrated. So I
Yeah.
think that's really important too. And all those things can kind of work together.
Yeah, that is really interesting. The idea of engagement being an important way to build respect. I don't think that's something I would have directly thought of, but anecdotally, I see that now that you mention it. I can think of examples over my life, in a teaching career where I saw teachers who just, they didn't have the respect of their students because they're like, oh, all he does is drone at us, or all she does is like make us read the textbook. And so having that attitude of, I'm here and I care about you and I'm trying to craft engaging lessons, even if we don't do it well all the time, does matter and does contribute to respect. I also think that respecting the students is a huge way to build respect
Yes.
because um, if they feel disrespected, they will not respect you. And this, I mean, maybe I'm not experienced as much with elementary, so I'm not sure how much that comes into play, but especially in the teenage years when they are really learning the levels of like authority and they're starting to say, like, okay, I know you're in charge of me, but I also have a lot of say in what happens here. And so they kind of push boundaries a little more. And so I think if you show them, I respect you, and therefore I expect you to respect me back, it's a mutual respect that can go a really, really long way. My litmus test for that is like, would I talk this way to a colleague? Like, how is my tone of voice? What's my word choice? And if not, if I'm talking down to them or if I'm like belittling them, even we do it subtly as teachers, like, well, that's a stupid thing. We don't mean to, but we can easily slip into that just because we're in charge and they're not, and they're kids and, they're kids. So, but I think that that's a really big part of it.
I think you're right. That's a really good point. And just I know this is what you mean, but just to clarify for everybody, respecting the students, like that does not mean we let them do what they want, right? But
Exactly.
it does mean that like it means that we're going to hold them accountable. We're going to expect a lot about them. We're going to believe in them and we're going to kind of communicate that confidence to them, right? Like you said, the way
Yeah.
it's more about the way we do it.
Yeah.
If we're just, lambasting them, lecturing them all
Yeah.
the time, talking down to them, like that's going to erode that respect versus dealing with the issue, but in an attitude of like, I believe in you. Oh yeah, you're going to do this.
Yeah.
I know you can do it. And just having that level is totally different. You're right. That
Yeah.
is a really good point.
Yeah, and it's very much like we're still the ones in charge. It's like the way, but it's the way, think about like how you'd want your boss to treat you. Like you don't want your boss to
Yes.
like talk down to you or act like you're incapable or, or even just like, you shouldn't have done that. That was really stupid. Why'd you do that? You want someone to have like to come to you. Yes, I'm in charge, but I respect you as a person. And so we're going to have like good discussions and respectful discussions and tone of voice is appropriate. And I show that I value you and things like that. And so we're very much still in charge for sure.
Yes, absolutely. So another area that I know you want to talk about and I want to talk about was this idea of, also of being organized and of avoiding dead space in the classroom.
Yes.
Because when you are like when there is dead space in the classroom, nothing's happening, that is just inviting chaos.
Mhm.
Actually, I think you worded it really well. You're just like, no, dead. I forget how you worded it exactly. But yeah, not having that dead space because, and it's so important to be organized. I'm just thinking of like the flow of the classroom. If we have the next activity ready, if we're going from thing
Yeah.
to thing, if we're wandering around, like, I mean, it happens to the best of us. You can't
Yeah.
find something, but if we're always like looking for something and like all this dead space is being created, that not only creates that space for students to like, well, I'm bored, I got to do something, but it also, it does kind of erode that, like, oh, they lost everyone, we're all going to do that. But if that's happening all the time and you're creating that extra chaos, that really is another layer that's not the
Mhm.
right direction that we want to go.
Yeah. I can't remember exactly how I phrased it either, but just over the years, I have learned to dread any dead space. Like the best classes, when I get to the end of, a class period and it's just been, and I'm just like, yes, that was beautiful. Cause let's admit that we don't do this all the time and that's okay. It's progress, not perfection, but, is always when I had the stuff lined up, I had it ready to go. I chunked my time. So there wasn't like, you're going to spend 30 minutes reading. It was like, okay, maybe you spend 10 minutes reading, but then you stop and you do a turn and talk, or you answer a question, or we rotate through the room doing something like getting some of that movement in. And we do that the entire class period consistently. That's when there's way less behavior issues. And I really feel like successful as a teacher.
Yes, yeah, I so important just to be organized, have that, not have that dead space. That makes
Mhm.
such a big difference. So there's so much more we can say, and in a minute we're going to get Ashley's kind of final thoughts on this. But I kind of want to wrap this up and just saying, if you're listening to this and saying, okay, wow, there's a lot of good thoughts here. Like, what do I do with this? A couple things. First of all, I would love to invite you to a free training we're doing called Back to School Classroom Management and Motivation next week. So we would love to invite you to that. It's absolutely free. You're going to get more details and help with this. That's at teachfortheheart.com/training is where you can sign up for that. But as you think about the start to school in particular, you really want to make sure that you are starting off right. Like that moment those students walk into the classroom, that is such a magical moment. Like those first 10 minutes, that first hour you have with them, they are checking you out. They're looking for those intangibles, and so being
Mhm.
ready to go, being prepared, we don't have time to talk all about this, but being prepared to teach procedures and insist that they're followed, have your expectations clear, consistently deal with things according to your plan, all that is so important. So once again, I recommend coming to that free training. It's kind of a first step. We also have Classroom Management 101. We talked about getting clear on what do you expect and then how am I going to handle it. You can do that on your own, but if you're like, I want some help with that, we have a program called Classroom Management 101 that will help you walk through all of that. You can go to teachfortheheart.com/CM101. And if you use the code podcast20, you can save 20% on your enrollment. But yeah, this is a great time of year to kind of get ready, because that back to school is a great opportunity to start off right instead of kind of, getting a little bit behind the eight ball, as it were, and having to kind of make all that up. Ashley, do you have any final thoughts as we wrap up this episode?
One thing that we haven't covered directly that I do think is also important is that teachers who cut off misbehavior before it starts. I think that's another really big thing
Yes.
where it would be subtle and you might not notice it. But I think it's really important. And I think that's why we sometimes see kids behaving differently for one teacher versus another. It's not that they weren't going to do that misbehavior in, Mrs. So-and-so's class. It's just that Mrs. So-and-so saw it coming and she cut it off before it was able to actually grow. And so I think that's another thing. It's encouraging to remember that, because you can kind of stop personalizing it. Sometimes it feels like, oh my gosh, I'm just a failure. No, you're not. The kid was going to behave exactly the same way in the classroom down the hall. You
Mm.
just have to practice identifying what is that. And one of those things is the downtime, right? Like being aware, don't give them downtime. That doesn't give them a chance to misbehave. But the other thing is also just observing. Oh, Johnny's looking fidgety. Okay, so maybe Johnny needs an errand, or ask Johnny to pass out the papers, or you can tell Johnny is poking someone. Just be like, hey Johnny, why don't you come over here and do this instead? Just those little things that are really subtle, and often nobody would pick up on it, especially if they don't know your students well. Like they wouldn't know why you sent Johnny to the office, but it's because Johnny was about to really make the classroom chaotic and you just cut it off at the pass. So I think that's another really important aspect.
Oh, that's a great point, right? So starting to develop those skills, that's observation, noticing what are those warning signs that are
Mhm.
coming up before something happens. That's great. And I think another prevention tool that we didn't get to talk about too much either is dealing with problems while they're small, especially in the beginning of the school
Yes.
year. I think a big mistake is like, oh, it's just, I know I totally did this. It's just a
Yeah.
little whispering. It's not a big deal. I don't really need to
Mhm.
deal with it. And we hear this advice, don't sweat the small stuff. That's great advice in life, not good advice for beginning setting up your
Yeah.
classroom in August and September. Not good advice. We really do need to sweat the small stuff. Deal with stuff while it's small before it's a big deal. And
Mhm.
that shows students, yeah, no, this isn't how we're going to do it. We're going to do it, we're going to do it this way. We're going to take our learning seriously. We're going to respect each other and all of that. And that does cut off a lot of things. As opposed to when we let it go, it starts to snowball and get bigger and bigger and bigger.
And in September, like, we have to remember, like, it's almost like we're retraining the kids how to do school. You would think they would
Yes.
know. They've been doing it for 5, 6, 10 years. No, in September, they come back and they are in summer mode. So it is our job as teachers to say, "No, this is how we do things. I know I taught you this last year." Like, at least for me, I have the same kids 4 years in a row because it's a small school. But, maybe they're brand new kids. So another teacher taught you this last year, but I'm gonna reteach you. This is how we behave in class. This is what we do. And that's why September is probably one of the most exhausting times for teachers, because that's when you have to be the most locked in, the most focused on teaching those expectations and holding students accountable. And it can be tiring, but it's worth it, because then after that they settle into the flow and they know what to do and they're just in school mode, and they behave for you.
Yep, I love that. It's not easy, but it is so worth it. And I hope that's what you walk away from this is not like, oh my goodness. Like, I hope you walk away with thinking, okay, I can be that teacher across the hall.
Yes.
It's just going to take some work, some practice, but I can get there in a year or two. Like, I can work at
Mhm.
this and get better. And that can absolutely be you. They don't have something magical that you don't have. You just got to keep working and developing these skills. So, Ashley, thank you so much for being with us. And thank you guys for listening. It's been a pleasure. I can't wait to talk with you again soon. And I hope to see you at that free back to school classroom management and motivation training. Go to teachfortheheart.com/training to sign up for that. Well, this episode has been brought to you in partnership with the Herzog Foundation. All views and opinions are our own, don't necessarily reflect those of the Herzog Foundation. We look forward to being with you again soon. In the meantime, teacher, remember, God is at work in you and through you, and He's using you to make a difference. Keep your eyes on Him and teach for the heart.